Oh. Yes, and this meeting is being recorded, and we had sent in an email before, but if you have any concerns with this, please just send them in the chat. So I just want to start off by saying thank you all for attending this workshop on Black women-led food justice initiatives, and a big thank you to UC Berkeley Rausser College of Natural Resources for co-sponsoring this event along with Serc, or the Student Environmental Resource Center here at UC Berkeley. We're so fortunate to have 3 amazing speakers joining us tonight, each with unique and diverse experiences within the food advocacy sector. Unfortunately, one of our speakers, Pinky Winchester, who is the founder and executive chef of the restaurant Pinky and Reds, is not able to attend the event live, but she sent us some presentation material in her place. I would also like to introduce my fellow organizers who planned this event. So my name is Sabina, and I am a Green Team Associate for the Student Environmental Resource Center. Celine Yang, who is also an organizer, is here. She is my fellow Green Team Associate, and we work on a lot of zero waste initiatives on campus. Gabrielle is our Environmental Justice Associate. She'll be speaking later in the event, and also helping with a lot of the tech stuff. So if you have any tech questions, feel free to send them her way or any of our ways. Dante is a recent UC Berkeley graduate and Serc staff member. We're so happy to have him stick around and help with this event. And Tess is our Carbon Neutrality Engagement Fellow. So yeah, if you have any questions, all of us are free to answer those in the chat. We'd like to begin our evening with a little bit of background on the host organization Serc and the reason why we chose to focus today's event on food justice in particular. So I'll pass it on to Celine for that introduction.
Thank you, Sabina. So really quick announcement for those new participants coming in. If you would like to view captions, there is a link to do so in the chat. So a little bit about Serc. So first of all, who are we? Here's a lovely photo of the Serc staff from our retreat earlier this year, pre-COVID, of course. So Serc stands for the Student Environmental Resource Center. And as you can see here, we are a student-run collaborative space at UC Berkeley. So we have a wide range of programs focused on zero waste research, closed loop systems, renewable energy implementation, community building, and of course, environmental justice programming and education. So the current COVID-19 pandemic has only shown us that it's even more critical for us to focus our efforts and platform towards urgent environmental health issues like food insecurity, which disproportionately affects low-income communities and communities of color. In light of the ongoing Black Lives Matter movement and a growing consensus around the need for more equitable economic and social systems, this workshop aims to highlight Black voices in the immediate community and beyond who are doing important work in the food justice sector. So while Serc does regularly host a wide variety of food justice and environmental justice events, now more than ever, we feel that it's incredibly important to make space for education and conversation around this tightly bound intersection, the intersection between food justice and racial justice.
Before turning it over to our amazing panelists, we want to give a brief presentation on food justice and BIPOC or Black, Indigenous, People of Color food advocacy efforts to put our questions and discussions into context. We'll be defining some important terminology as we go, so if you have any questions or comments, again, please message one of us. So to start off, when we talk about the food system, we're referencing the complex web of activities relating to the production, processing, transport, consumption, and disposal of food. This term encompasses not only how food goes from our farm or from farms to our individual plates, but all of the infrastructure involved in feeding an entire population, i.e. agricultural, economic, policy, and culinary systems. For a little bit of historical context, the food system we have today was and is built upon systems of oppression dating back to the foundation of the United States, with white European settlers importing labor in the form of BIPOC to grow and harvest food both unsustainable to the native land and detrimental to the health of the farmers, exploiting foreign workers and uprooting indigenous habitants. With the passage of the Indian Removal Act in 1830, which forced indigenous peoples from their land, and the subsequent passage of the Homestead Act, which redistributed the stolen land among white settlers, We've reached a point where today the majority of our country's farms exist on stolen land. In the mid-1950s, legal slavery was still the dominant means of farm labor, and even after the 13th Amendment was ratified in 1865, Jim Crow laws continued to institutionalize the discrimination and criminalization of Black people, leaving former slaves with little to no agency to buy or own land. Even when Black farmers began to amass millions of acres of farmland at the start of the 20th century, violent racism and systemic oppression in the South forced them to migrate north. Thanks to highly discriminatory land ownership policy like heirs property and Torrens Acts, they lost about 90% of their land in the process. The food justice movement itself emerged from the environmental justice movement in the 1980s. So this image on the left shows protesters in North Carolina blocking the delivery of toxic polychlorinated biphenol to a landfill in their community right by their houses, and taking an active stance against environmental racism. Food justice, in particular, addresses the need for a more structural and holistic view of our food system, asserting healthy, sustainable food as a human right reinforced by structures in place. We have statistics showing that Indigenous Americans are 60% more likely to suffer from obesity than white Americans, and that the rate of diagnosed diabetes is 77% higher in Black people and 66% higher in Hispanic peoples as compared to white people. But we can't isolate these facts from the legacy of a food system built on the exploitation of BIPOC as it exists today.
Yes, so obviously there is a very racialized, colonized, imperialistic, roots to the food justice movement. And why we're showing you all this today in tandem with a history lesson just of America and the growth of the agricultural system is that because innately this movement is very intersectional. It's a movement interconnected with the push for equitable hiring policies, improved K-12 education, greater access to affordable transportation, and basically just anything that really just supports your neighborhood. And I think that's what's really great about food justice is that it connects so many aspects of your neighborhood together to come together for common causes. It's all just centered around food. And like the growth of food, the ability to just own your own food, give your food out to your people as well too, it really is something that is empowering, and it breaks us innately away from this very colonial system that we have now acknowledged. We are using the term food apartheid because it goes beyond the misconception that a well-stocked grocery store is an end-all solution. And instead, we're using it to acknowledge the social, economic, and political forces that have caused these circumstances to arise. When we say food insecure communities, we must preface that this label is not a deficit of the people in those areas, but as a result of a food system that on one hand encourages surplus buying and therefore food waste, and on the other hand leaves over 37 million Americans with a heavy burden of overcoming hunger. Since the World Summit in 1996, we've known that food security can only exist when everybody at all times has both physical and economic access to safe and healthy food that enables them to both satisfy their dietary needs and preferences and live an active, healthy life. There's been a similar push for food sovereignty spearheaded by the International Peasants Movement, La Via Campesina. Food sovereignty established the rights of peoples to define their own food and agricultural system, putting the needs of the people themselves, those who produce, distribute, and consume food, all at the heart of food policies instead of capitalistic market demands. It's a bottom-up approach led by the farmers and indigenous workers most impacted by our detrimental food system, and it's all about rebuilding relationships with the land and maintaining harmony with natural ecosystems, a concept the industrial food system has tried hard to strip away. Just to ground this in like our space, like here on Chochenyo Ohlone land or Berkeley, I just want to like shout out the Gill Tract and like all the work that like the Black Earth Farms is doing, all the work that the Segurite Land Trust is doing, and just like rematriating our land and making sure that we're building food systems. And then also just like everything that is going on right now, how those food systems really are rebuilding our communities.
Yes, and in the recognition of that, we would like to take a moment to also recognize Black, Indigenous, people of color that have continuously pushed us forward one step further towards food justice every single day. For example, historically in the 1960s in Oakland, the Black Panther Party organized the Free Breakfast for School Children program, which fed thousands of children per day in an otherwise systemically ignored environment by the federal government. Around the same time, with the formation of the United Farm Workers in 1965, founded by Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, this ultimately demonstrated a front by United Filipinos Filipino and Mexican workers in a labor rights movement that has paved the way for legislation guaranteeing basic rights to agricultural workers. Across the San Francisco Bay Area of California, the food justice movement is diverse and growing. So as Dante mentioned, from Black Earth Farms to People's Grocery in Oakland to farmland preservation in Marin County, a wide array of communities, thinkers, and activists are exploring new horizons in the fight for a more equitable food system and for food justice. These organizers, farmers, and advocates are dismantling systemic racism in the food system through policy, urban agriculture, education, community organizing, and a shared love for cooking food that not only nourishes our souls, but reminds us of our roots. Over the past few months, we've seen how the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated already rampant food insecurity and injustice, which at present leaves 40% of Black and Hispanic households struggling to adequately feed their families. With little job security for food service workers, underfunded food assistance programs, and a federal government that at current turns a blind eye to these injustices, we must look to grassroots leaders, paving the way for a more equitable and racially just food system. In the recognition of a rather bleak history of injustices, it is duly important to always celebrate members of our communities and leaders in our communities who are continuously, again, helping push us one step further towards that vision of justice every single day. Because at the end of the day, food is ultimately a communal experience and it brings us together. So we would like to, at present, now recognize the three amazing panelists joining us today that are actively working to decolonize that experience for the future.
Sorry, one moment, y'all. We just wanted to set some intentional community agreements before embarking on this panel and following discussion. It's important that we all understand and adhere to these agreements in order to foster an inclusive and empowering environment. So first, we want to honor confidentiality and privacy. What's said here stays here, but what's learned here leaves here. Respect others, understand the context. Have an open heart and mind. Everybody is coming from a different place with unique experiences, so let's keep this a judgment-free zone and implement radical love wherever we can. Our third one is intent versus impact. Be mindful when your questions turn from innocence to ignorance. Good intent is irrelevant if what you said has a harmful impact on others. Our fourth one is Black or brown women are not your textbooks. Our wonderful speakers are here to share their experiences and insight, but it's our individual responsibility to continue to educate ourselves on these concepts. Our fifth one is make space and take space. Our sixth one is engage in active listening. Be present and committed, and keep your video camera on if possible, even though it's easy to zone out on Zoom. We hope you're here because you want to be engaged. Our seventh one is speak from I. Avoid generalizing your personal beliefs or stories as applicable to everybody here. Our eighth one is it's okay not to be articulate. These are difficult topics and discussions that present a learning experience for all of us. So please don't feel like every thought has to be eloquently worded. Our ninth one is give trigger warnings, especially when reflecting on an emotionally tolling experience or sharing graphic or violent details. Our 10th one is bubbles, which means don't be afraid to ask questions in the chat. So that one is sort of like if there's a word or like something that someone says and you're unfamiliar with, like we welcome you to ask the question in the chat so we can clarify and all be on the same page. Our 11th one is give affirmations and discussions, which can be verbally or through the chat function. Our 12th one is the platinum rule. So the golden rule is that you treat others how you want to be treated, but the platinum rule is to respect others how they want to be treated. And our last rule is please keep yourself muted if you are not speaking.
Now we want to introduce our panelists for the evening. First off, even though Pinky Winchester is unable to join us today, we would still like to honor the amazing work she's done as an entrepreneur and a vital member of the Berkeley food community. Pinky was kind enough to send us some material, including the following blurb that she wrote, which I will read now. So Pinky is the owner and executive chef of Pinky and Red's restaurant. known for its, quote, soulful comfort meals served on a sandwich, end quote. Pinky and Red started as a La Cocina incubator, business operating as a pop-up business out of UC Berkeley's campus, located in the MLK Student Union building. The restaurant began as a dynamic duo, a mother-daughter team, but is now owned and operated by Bernie, aka Pinky, since January of 2019. Pinky comes from a very long line of cooks, chefs, and entrepreneurs, and is proud to have some very strong African-American family values, and is equally proud of her family legacy and loves sharing her family recipes and her ancestors' stories. The restaurant's menus are developed based on Pinky's family's recipes from their old-fashioned Sunday dinners that her ancestors once served. Her dedication to preparing those priceless family recipes that was once served on a platter or a plate are now served on a sandwich with that same flavor and authenticity as her mother's. Pinky carries the torch of her family's values, legacies, and recipes, and serving delicious goodness at Pinky and Red's restaurant with her soulful comfort meals on a sandwich. It is very important that they are made with fresh local ingredients and filled with those same soulful recipes her mother and ancestors served to their families and their guests and customers and slave owners over 100 years ago. It is very important to Pinky that she maintains the quality and taste that she is now entrusted with preserving into the next generation, so that one day her children and grandchildren will someday be able to do the same and more. And she sent us some pictures of some relatives and family members that she has inherited a lot of her recipes from. And I'm just going to play a little clip from Pinky's acceptance speech for the Best Supporting Chicken Sandwich Award. Let me know if you, let me just play it, and if you can hear me, maybe just give me a thumbs up for the panelists.
Let's fast forward to the story of my life here in the Bay Area and how I became a La Cocina participant. I really, really owe it all to Patti LaBelle and the release of her sweet potato pie. Yeah. Patty pies were always sold out, and I realized no one cooks Sunday dinners or sweet potato pies anymore. So I wondered, was it that no one had grandma's recipes, or they just could not cook it like grandma? So my daughter Cicely and I began discussing and reflecting on our Sunday dinners. We asked ourselves, how do we preserve those old recipes and keep that valuable part of the African-American culture alive? This revelation led me to research all my family's old-fashioned Sunday dinner recipes. After some extensive digging, I discovered information about my family's history, our recipes, and a long line of family cooks dating back to 1859. I then began to see how my ancestors cooked to live, to survive, and to serve others. That history inspires what I do every day, and it reflects in everything we do at Pinky and Red's, from the layout of the restaurant to the menu, and yes, to the chicken sandwich recipe. Yes. So let's.
Great, and our next speaker, I'll pass it over to Gabby to introduce Candice.
All right, and now I'd like to give some, I'd like to introduce Candice Elder, who's the founder and executive director of the East Oakland Collective. Candice, are you there to speak on your work? Introduce yourself.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Again, Candice Elder. I'm founder and executive director of the East Oakland Collective, born and raised in East Oakland. And I started the East Oakland Collective 4.5 years ago as a way to give back to my communities, my neighborhoods that I grew up in, as well as to get ahead of the curve of gentrification and the further displacement of Black residents out of Oakland, in particular, East Oakland, which we call the last frontier, where you will still find the most land left, and you will still find the highest population of Black residents left in Oakland. So for what us driving racial economic equity looks like is civic engagement and leadership, particularly making sure our residents are invested in politics, as well as community, neighborhood, transportation planning, economic empowerment, and probably what we are most known for, and what brings me here as a member of the food justice sector, is the work that we do to address food and supply insecurity for Oakland's most vulnerable populations. And that is our unhoused, and now because of COVID, we even expanded to include seniors, folks who are differently abled, folks who are compromised, pretty much anyone who is suffering from this widened food insecurity due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We have several popular food distribution programs, including our Feed the Hood program, which started off really simple concepts that we are definitely inspired by the Black Panther Party and being able to do for your community in the absence and the lack of government support, in which we gather hundreds and hundreds of community volunteers to make meals and to make hygiene kits and go actually across the city of Oakland to distribute those meals and hygiene kits. We have been doing that since September 2017. And last year we embarked on what I call food reparations. Is we would make a 3-hour round trek to Silicon Valley to bring back, before COVID, we were bringing back 400 pounds of excess food from tech companies, repackaging, repurposing them, and then giving them to folks who are hungry and are impoverished. So food for us it's really simple. It's a really simple and basic human right. But we see that, how much the lack of access to food, the lack of access to fresh food options has really hurt our most vulnerable communities. So EOC is grateful to be at the table to be able to address that.
Thank you so much, Candice. We appreciate you being here. Next, Dante will introduce Ayano.
Oh, so I have the pleasure to introduce Ayano Jeffries Fabro, or Aya. She is the project manager for the East Oakland Grocery Cooperative at Acting on Verba. So welcome, Ayano.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Serc, for setting this up. And I'm so honored to be sitting next to these amazing women on this panel. So giving thanks for this space and for the organizing hands and all the participants, all y'all who I can't see, but I know that y'all have beautiful faces. So my name is Ayano. Folks usually call me Aya, but I go by both. I am 26 years old. I just turned 26 last year, and I'm a Cal alumni, so go Bears. And my role right now is as project manager for the East Oakland Grocery Cooperative, which is a startup project through Acting on Verba Youth Urban Farm Project. They're our fiscal sponsor. But really, I look at my role in the village just overall as the connector of people to each other, to land, and by way of food and food culture. We all need to eat. We all have different connections and stories and histories that are strengthened. And as Pinky mentioned, that is something that is used to not only uplift our culture, but to intergenerationally heal. So I grew up in Hawaii. I was born and raised in a small old sugar plantation town called Wailua. So my upbringing was very different from where I live now currently and work in East Oakland. But there are a lot of parallels of food insecurities, of land injustice, of environmental injustice implicated on low-income communities of color. So there are a lot of parallels, urban, rural parallels between land and food justice that as I moved up here to the Bay Area for school, that I was able to make those connections. So I also come from a family of educators, of land healers, of food growers, in many different aspects, from having ancestors who were enslaved farm workers on in what we call America, to Japanese farmers who were interned during the internment camps, to Filipino migrants who worked the sugar plantation fields in Hawaii. So my lineage is rooted in land, is rooted in that connection and that the stewardship. And I also grew up with educators as parents. So I believe firmly that we're all students of life. I believe myself to be a student of life. And just giving space for constant intergenerational knowledge sharing. And a little bit about our work at the East Oakland Grocery Co-op. I know I'll go into it a little bit later. But we are working with legacy-rooted East Oakland residents to start a worker-owned grocery cooperative. So that is a grocery store model where the folks that work in the store own the store. And we're doing that through what we call community-driven planning that was sort of sparked by a project, an initiative that we were actually a part of with Candice and EOC called the East Oakland Neighborhood Initiative. So we're really trying to drive home the notion of by the people, for the people, by any means necessary. And taking what we're calling the black prints from history, from our predecessors, and doing the renovations and reinforcements to make a stronger systems change that we want to see today. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm really looking forward to sharing more.
Great. And last but definitely not least, we have Raine Truth, who is the founder and owner of The Cultured Vegan. So Raine, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, peace and blessings all, and thank you for having me. First, I definitely want to give honor to my ancestors, that they are the reason I am here and for the work that I do. Again, I am Chef Raine Truth. I am the owner of The Cultured Vegan, full service, a plant-based 100% catering company. Also, we have a culinary program for children ages 4 to 18. And also I'm the founder of the Midwest Vegan Fest, which is a food fest. We talk about food justice. It's about connecting local and national plant-based or food companies that may not otherwise have the forum or the platform to promote and display their products and things of that nature. I typically do it in areas where there are not that much access to healthy and fresh food, to give people that one location where they can come and have a place to shop and get things like that. The thing with what I do for children, kind of connecting them back, incorporating that freedom of expression, not only to incorporate healthy eating in their lifestyle, but to help them feel proud. And so the culinary program that I have, it really connects them with healthy living and try to get them away from what's going on, kind of like the food deserts. It's easy for them to go get hot Cheetos at the corner store, but it's hard for them to get an apple or a banana in their communities. So just really like instilling that love and that foundation of, hey, this is something that not only you can do, but you can feel proud doing as well. So I come from a family of gardeners. My father was a master gardener. My grandparents also were gardeners, had land filled with fresh fruit, vegetables. I've been an owner of The Cultured Vegan since 95. So about 24 years I've been doing what I do. And it's been so rewarding to be able to help people of color, Black people, Hispanic, to really like eat healthier, because we are the highest population that suffers from diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, and food allergies is something that we don't really talk about a lot. A lot of African Americans are lactose intolerant. So, really showing people how to eat healthy again and just giving them a different way of life and understanding that, I don't have to compromise on what I'm eating. I don't have to compromise on the taste. I can still enjoy what I'm eating, but I can also preserve my life as well. So that's kind of what I do. And this topic here is so important to me just because, you know, we need access to healthy and fresh food. And I want to show people not only by pointing them in the direction, but also providing them with those meals as well. So that's kind of what I've been up to over here in the Midwest.
Thank you, Raine, and thank you to all our panelists for those wonderful introductions. So now we'd like to move into our moderated Q&A portion of the evening. And to all our panelists, there's no order to the questions or the answers, so feel free to jump in with your response whenever feels natural. So Celine, would you like to start it off?
Yeah, so our first question of the night, well, it's kind of broken into two parts. So the first part is, what brought you into the food industry and what pushes you to continue your work with
Sorry, I'll cut in now. I think Celine's audio is connecting, but the question was, what brought you into the food industry or the food service sector, and what pushes you to continue your work within this sector? And as a secondary question, what is your personal connection to the land and the food? And again, any panelists can feel free to jump in.
Well, so for me, what brought me in, I knew at 6 years of age that this was what I wanted to do. And I was very passionate, watching my father grow and plant and, you know, watching that first bud come up out of the soil. That really like touched me at 6. And as a sophomore in high school, I seen, you know, I live by the military base, I seen sailors here around the holidays, and I'm like, you know, wow, they have nowhere to go. So that's kind of what pushed me into the food industry, into providing, you know, seeing a need and then wanting to provide it. So I started doing dinner parties for sailors that couldn't go home for the holidays. And my personal connection to the land, like I said, when I think about the struggle and the plight of my people and my ancestors, and, you know, just sometimes I have visions of them on the land, you know, and that's what keeps me going. That's what keeps me, like, the preservation of that story is very personal to me.
I'll jump in. Ashe to all of that, Raine. That was beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, similarly, I'm privileged in that I got to grow up in a place that is so interconnected with its natural environment in Hawaii. And the part of the Hawaii I grew up in was a rural, you know, the countryside. So it was considered, you know, a low income community of color, which is rapidly getting gentrified right now. And the demographics have drastically changed to be predominantly white. But the natural, you know, the land that I grew up with, that was my playground. You know, we grew up with the mountains and beaches. And so I had a different relationship with nature, spiritually, mentally, physically, nature being like these westernized terms that we even box it in, right? But it was always a connection. And given that my parents were and still are environmental educators, and that's not just 9 to 5 when they're on the job, this like constant education, right? Knowledge sharing. It became our way of living at home. You gave back to the land that gives you life, right? And you know, touching on our ancestral healing as well, like you said, Raine, like just envisioning our, you know, my predecessors working, you know, in their rooted land, right? So it's a really powerful connection that I'm so grateful that I grew up with. And that was able to translate into so many other things, but I kept coming back to food. I never thought that I would be in food, organizing food. I didn't want to go the nonprofit route, seeing my family go into nonprofits, right? And I like to joke that they brainwashed me into this from an early age. I didn't have any choice, but it was a choice. It definitely was a choice. You know, through school, this was just what we did, right? We would do service projects, we would do educational work, but and I always thought I was going to go into law or business, but I kept coming back to food. And it wasn't until I went to Cal and I had to start paying out-of-state tuition and really being intentional about my education and where I put those investments. I was like, if I'm paying all this money and I uprooted to move here, it's got to be worth something. And so a lot of meditation, a lot of self-reflection kept drawing me back to food. What are you passionate about? Where's your heart? Where do you think that you can, what do you think you can do for like the rest of your life that will keep you happy? And that was nourishing people on many different aspects, from actually making you food and giving it to you, to having conversations, deep conversations, to putting our hands to the soil and gardening, right? So I'm hoping that I answered both questions with that, but it really is so interconnected, and it's so much deeper than a job, than even a calling, right? This is us doing right by our ancestors, for our ancestors.
Thank you, Aya, and Chef Raine, for that. Like, I never imagined myself actually in the food justice sector, the food system sphere. But when I look at how I was raised where food has always been important to me and my family. My parents own a bakery in East Oakland, and the bakery, well, the former location of the bakery is actually blocks away from where my nonprofit office is. So it was like, there's no coincidence. My parents also helped start a food pantry at our church growing up. So I remember as like even a kindergartner, like going to the food bank, you know, and sometimes, and like, and we're serving food to folks who are experiencing housing insecurity at like 5, 6 a.m. You know, so really giving back, you know, to people in regards to food. You know, I started doing that early. So, you know, many years later, I find myself a food connector. I source ways to repurpose food and put it into hands of those who need it the most, whether it's people suffering deep food insecurity, be it someone who is living unhoused, in encampment in their car or RV, to a low-income family who may not be able to afford groceries, you know, to our elders, you know, who oftentimes they live alone and they don't cook. You know, so being able to provide, you know, access to fresh meals and fresh produce has become, you know, very crucial and important to me. You know, and actually I pride myself in being able to source fresh, organic, and gourmet food, you know, pairing some of these privileged palates, you know, that a lot of us, you know, the average person may not be able to afford, but bringing that food back into the community, you know, from these top restaurants and caterers and grocers and farms and other food sources. You know, there's an excessive amount of food that goes to waste. But we have people that go, you know, hungry like every single second of the day. And what keeps me in the food justice space is being able to address the gaps in the food distribution system. You know, so when I have a unhoused elder tell me that she only eats, you know, if I, you know, or one of my volunteers or one of my staff bring her the food because she trusts the quality, she trusts the safety of it, you know, it's full course, you know. So a lot of the times we think that folks who are hungry, folks who are in poverty, are folks who have access to food, you know, will eat anything. Like we give folks, you know, scraps, right? You know, so I really try to disrupt that frame of thinking and disrupt that system. We even, you know, stand against, you know, giving people an overabundance of stuff, particularly if they're living on the street. You know, there's a lot of environmental factors that really play into that. And then, you know, it's what you give and like how you give it. You know, folks are not, you know, peasants, you know. So if you're gonna bring like, you know, 50 loaves of bread, but without any other, you know, protein or vegetable, you know, or something else to pair it with, then don't give it at all, you know. So we really try to dispel myths in that people will eat anything, and really try to, you know, push back against that, you know, all certain communities want and need is like fast food options. You know, I'm born and raised in a food desert, and it's still a food desert. So I'm glad to see efforts like, you know, the East Oakland Grocery Cooperative that Aya is heading up, you know, looking to address some of those inequities, you know. So I'm known to be the lady with the good food, you know, and I proudly carry that title.
Thank you all so much. For the next question, it is, so what is your vision for a just food system, and how does that tie into your work at present?
I'll hop in and say that my vision for a just food system and a just world overall is a cooperative one. I truly believe we can take over the world cooperatively, as we say in our groups, but really going back to the notion of a village, right, and breaking the cycles of mass consumption, of capitalism, of white supremacy, you know, a lot of you know, unlearning and the breaking of cycles and creating new systems. Like, I think that I truly believe that that can be done through cooperative work, and that really isn't. It may seem as a foreign concept to folks, or something that's really hard to grasp, as if for folks that are new to it. I was new to it a few years ago, and you know, I was able to find community that's totally shifted the way I think about money, about ownership, about wealth building. But in terms of cooperatives, right, like, it is a lifestyle shift to me that goes back to our ancestral ways, that goes back to the ways that that people lived in harmony with each other, with nature, and breaks down these barriers, these Western oppressive barriers that we're so comfortable in today, right? For example, you know, a worker-owned cooperative, which we're developing, which is the model of cooperatives that we're developing in East Oakland, not only give autonomy to the members, right? So you have the worker ownership piece, but you also are building business equity. You are creating a steady job. You're regenerating economy within your community. You're supporting local vendors, businesses, Black and brown farmers, right? You have that power. When we talk about ownership, right, it's really to take back the control that was taken away from us. So I really truly believe that that reclaiming ourselves, our spirits, will eventually lead to stronger land reclamation movements, into stronger food reclamation movements. You know, in 1960s, Queen Mother Fannie Lou Hamer, who we know of her for a lot of Black voting right works that she did in the South Mississippi, right? But folks rarely talk about her cooperative development work. And I wanted to share a quote that's you know, really stuck with me, and Mama Fannie knew back in the 60s, right? And she said, food is used as a political weapon. But if you have a pig in your backyard, if you have some vegetables in your garden, you can feed yourself and your family, and no one can push you around. Even if we have no jobs, we can eat and we can look after our families, right? So going back to the village role, I'm a firm believer in that. And I know that it may seem far-fetched to some, but if that's the mindset that we have moving forward, then change isn't going to be created. We have to truly believe in the change that we're wishing for, right? We're not just thinking about the next 7 years, it's the next 7 generations that we are impacting today. And so I see a food system, a just food system, where Black and Indigenous folks are given reparations, land reparations, not just monetary reparations, right? We're talking about land reparations, we're talking about spiritual reparation, right? We're talking about uplifting these intersections that create the food system, right? It's not just a one-sided, one-face system. It's multifaceted. There's many intersections, there's many layers, and which is why it's become so weaponized against communities. Healthy food, like Candice said, that's a basic, simple human right. And they've turned it into such a violent tool for Black and Brown communities that so going off on a tangent here, but bringing it back to, seeing us reclaiming our bodies, reclaiming our land, reclaiming our food, our practices, our cultural practices, which then will translate into a just food system. I truly believe that.
Ashe on all of that. Like, my vision for a just, food system is definitely access. Access is at the forefront. Is access to healthy and fresh food options, as access to land for communities and families and individuals to actually grow, whether it's individually, whether it's collective land options, even though I agree with Aya that collectives, cooperatives is a way we are, Black and Brown communities are going to get free, because we know there's so much cards stacked against us, not to build like intergenerational wealth and systems. So the more that we actually go into these opportunities together, I think the more likelihood, we'll make them sustainable for generations to come. And I would love to see, in the improved intersection of health and wealth. They're very interconnected. And we are actually seeing that now because of COVID, why the Latinx community is 6 times, more likely to actually get infected with COVID. And the Black community is 2 to 3 times higher to die, from COVID, and is deep rooted in health, issues. And then when you unpack, not considering like, the health system and like, the racial inequities and the problems with that system. But when you just look at the food impacts that has on health, and how in our communities, like just down the street from me and within 2 block radius is like 7 to 8 fast food places, and if, in this capitalism system where they target us by putting a value menu, and if that's all we can afford, that is all our families are going to be eating, like every single day, and having stores, leave our communities and entering into, actually just learned that the McDonald's that's in my neighborhood, actually, they entered into a long-term contract with the city that no one else can bring in certain type of fresh food options in that vicinity, so are on that particular lot, so I said, who in their right mind would enter to that type of contract with McDonald's, and not allow food trucks and taco trucks and pop-up, opportunities, and maybe even one day the establishment of brick and mortars, into this community. I'm just like, we need to fire all the people, who were part of that that contract, you know, so it's like looking at that, you know, working against the system to kind of like to go against the grain, and because we live in a very even capitalist food system, you know, it trickles down, and we see it in our health, and we see it in our access. We see, you know, which grocery stores are in our communities versus not. So I would kind of like to see, you know, all that, you know, in a perfect world, you know, we're all at this table, you know, striving for perfected.
So yes, she hit it right on the head. I mean, I really can't say it any better than that. And just like Sister Candice, access and just really providing people the opportunity to know that there's more out here, you know, giving them access to healthy and fresh food. I mean, that's really the key for me, and people being able to have that opportunity. So.
Great, thank you so much. Our next question is, given the history of racial inequities within the food industry, how do you see this intersection between food justice and the food industry in general and racial justice evolving?
As you see, I think about the silence, this is a really tough question, you know, to answer, because I think we're kind of, you know, we're definitely in very interesting times right now. And I honestly, and I know this kind of segues into like the next question about kind of like how the community's been affected by COVID. But I think COVID is bringing awareness to a lot of the issues that have been plaguing our communities, you know, since the beginning of time. You know, but what we're seeing it exacerbated to the point where we all have to pay attention, you know, so, and we have to pay attention to the deep rooted causes of why we are here. So I see, you know, I'm really glad to see the emergence of, you know, more urban farms, and really urban farms run by younger generations, like the millennials, you know, and below, you know, and saying that we are going to farm in our backyards. You know, we are, if we live in an apartment, we're going to farm on our balconies. You know, we are going to create, you know, planter boxes and food systems, however we can, so that we can be, you know, self-sustaining. And then also we are going to offer that food back to the community, and most times offer it for free. You know, we have you know, huge movement to, you know, eat plant-based, you know, to, you know, explore being vegan. You know, we see, and you know, some of our elders, you know, we're already on that path. And, you know, eating more plant-based, you know, is kind of like a more trajectory with our ancestors. You know, a lot of this dairy and all this stuff that we're eating is not really, you know, in our lineage, you know, as Black and brown folks. But so we see huge, we're starting to see more shifts, you know, away from that, you know, and I think there's also even pressure on the commercial side to even include more healthy options, you know, in that, you know, value menu or whatever. Like, if that's all people can afford, okay, so, you know, there's more, you're seeing a little bit more of, you know, corporate social responsibility to say, hey, we have to do better. And they might have been sued a million times, you know, but, and that might have been kind of like the driving force. But we definitely see, I think we're starting to see a shift. And I think because of COVID, we're starting to see more awareness, and then also more emphasis on like food, what exactly is food justice, you know, and how you know, it's not just as simple as it sounds. It's not just food. It's not just growing it. It's not just distributing it. It's not just, you know, producing and packaging it and everything. There's actually a lot of power in all the channels of the food system, and it's Black and brown folks and just communities of color taking back ownership, you know, of that power.
I can hop in. Yeah, Candice touched on a lot of the major. Oh yeah. Okay, sorry, getting distracted by the chat. A lot of the major things that we're seeing that's being, you know, the veil's being lifted, right, in this pandemic. So we're really seeing inconsistencies with our food supply chain, and I know we'll talk about that with the next question. But I think that gentrification definitely is a huge contributing factor to the racial and food, like the intersections between race and food. It's so interesting because as I continue my career in the food justice and food systems in Oakland, there's so many parallels to what's happening back in Hawaii, but it's like flipped on its head, right? So for example, you know, back in my hometown in Hawaii, Wailua, it's like I said, it used to be a sugar plantation town. It was one of the last, I believe, on the island. So up until like the late 90s, that was what the town's income was based off of, right? Now it's switched to tourism, to catering to tourists that come out to the North Shore, surfers, right? And so what we're seeing with gentrification in terms of how it affects food is that these new gentrifiers are bringing in food options that locals can't afford, right? So we have a McDonald's in our town. We used to have a KFC, it closed down. But there was a good amount of local restaurants, and those folks can't keep up with the rent as gentrification increases, and therefore, you know, locals back in home are forced to actually either go to that one single McDonald's or drive 20 minutes outside of the town to go to another cheap chain restaurant. So it's such an interesting parallel to what's happening here in East Oakland, where it's a clear food apartheid, right? And we use the word apartheid because a desert is a natural landscape. This isn't natural. This has systematically been put in place through various intersection systems, right? We're talking about redlining. We're talking about, you know, the crack epidemic. We're talking about so many different factors that go into stripping Black and brown communities of their essential needs, but also shifting the way folks think about, you know, and I see Chef Raine touched on it a little bit, but really valuing ourselves and valuing our bodies and what we deserve to have happy, healthy bodies, right? So I think that when we talk about racial justice right now in this same time, it begins with acknowledgement by the oppressors, right? It begins with acknowledgement of the violence inflicted on BIPOC communities as a result of ongoing white supremacy in this country for hundreds and hundreds of years. Let's name that. Let's name that this country was founded on land that was stolen from Indigenous people and is still being stolen by Indigenous people and cultivated by, you know, people who were stolen from their homeland in Africa and forced to be enslaved on foreign land. And that's not to say that slavery does not exist today. Just because Jim Crow has ended doesn't mean that there aren't still slave systems in place. Let's talk about in the prison industrial complex and all of those folks incarcerated who are growing our food, right? Let's talk about migrant workers in California, which is the biggest ag provider in the country, right? Still exploiting labor. Like and just it's tucked away and hidden now. So I think that, like, you know, like Candice was saying, that these things are now coming to light and being heightened as this pandemic goes on, and we're really seeing how flawed it is, but also how intentional those systems have been put in place in certain communities.
Raine, if you wanted to add anything, go ahead. Otherwise, we can continue.
So I really think that people are demanding equality more. I think that as you know, the pandemic has arisen, I think people are more vocal now and really letting people know, like, we see the difference. We see that we are not getting what we deserve. And I think that they're demanding more from corporations. I mean, look at all the food chains, McDonald's, Burger King, they're adding plant-based options to their menus because the demand is there. And I think that, like she said, like, as the younger generation, like, they don't care, you know? So they're like, look, this is what we need and this is what we're gonna do to get it. So either give it to us or there's gonna be problems, you know? And I think that they're finally starting to listen a bit more. I feel like we still have a ways to go, but I think that, you know, food justice and racial justice, I think they go hand in hand. And like I said, the demand is there. So it's kind of a domino effect, and it's trickling into, you know, it's trickling into from the food justice category to the racial justice. It's just going hand in hand, you know, so.
And if I just may, like, add one more thing for folks watching, you know, for folks who are joining in, education is so important for having these deeper conversations, because as consumers, as a consumer-based country, we often think that our consumption habits, changing those will change the rest of the system, right? So if we shop at Whole Foods, oh, we're good. If you buy the vegan version of McDonald's, oh, you're fine, right? We need to start going deeper. And like Chef Raine was saying, like, that now it seems to be at like this crescendo of, oh, we're gonna get what we want, right? We're gonna get what our grandparents and great grandparents and parents have been talking about this whole time. Like, so yeah, I think I just wanted to drive home education. And for folks, I hope that a takeaway from this is for folks to actually go and do research. Go and do research about those movements that were talked about at the beginning of this presentation, and why it's important to bring in the intersections and not just end at, oh, I'm gonna eat healthier, or I'm gonna buy local, right? It does go deeper than that.
Yeah, thank you all for those responses. Dante, if you want to introduce the next question.
Yeah, so our next question is, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, how has your community come together to support each other during this time?
Well, so I'll speak on that. My community, I mean, wow, like, it has been crazy when I talked about village and, you know, supporting each other. I mean, it's been crazy. I've seen so many people like promoting each other and supporting each other, creating things just so that, you know, we can like help each other's businesses. Most of the people in my circle are small business owners. So initially in the beginning, everyone was really kind of down and kind of just, you know, not really knowing what the next direction was. But they have been so encouraging and helping people to, okay, hey, look, this is how we're going to turn this around. And so, look, hey, turn this into a business. Let's make it lucrative. I mean, I can't say how many people started making masks during this time, you know, that people, my seamstress friends, you know, it's like, hey, we're going to take this because we're resilient. You know, we are resilient people, and we know how to turn, you know, something into nothing. And that's what I've been seeing. I've been seeing, you know, people support each other, people going out of their way to specifically support Black and Brown companies that otherwise wouldn't have even had an eye looked at, so that's how we've been coming together. And just the support, the encouragement of, hey, we're going to get through this, that reassurance and stuff. That's what I've been getting. And it's been great.
Yeah, I've definitely seen more awareness about food insecurity, because more people, there are people from all different type of walks of life, income brackets, now need access to food. So you have people who could always provide for their families, who could put food on the table. They are either suffering from financial hardship, or they're sheltering in place. Folks who are COVID positive, really, or who are quarantined and isolating, they lost their access to food. They lost a lot of their family and friend support. So we're seeing the community actually band together to address, the exacerbated food insecurity. I have never seen so many food donations and support from farmers market all across Northern California, from farms all across Northern California, from restaurants. In my life, I'm like, where were you guys, before COVID? But it's really been great. I've really been grateful and just blessed to get this outpouring of support, regarding food, and then more interest in people wanting to see that the people who need it the most get the food that they need. Even folks are able to grow the food that they need. I see a rise in like seed donations and planter box donations. Is really bringing people awareness up and being about, how can I, in case of there's another pandemic or even natural disaster, how can I be able to provide for myself, my family, my community, my neighbors in need. And there's different type of entities. More of us are talking to each other where we may not have been connected, before. I want to shout out, I see the staff of Food Shift, is on this webinar, and they provide EOC with fresh produce every single week. And we're able to bring that produce to our unhoused clients and to our seniors, and that has just been, and we're grateful to, organizations like Food Shift who recognize that there's a deepened need in the community, and we're going to help address that. And to piggyback what Raine said, is that I do see more support, for BIPOC owned, small businesses, particularly in the food sector. So if it wasn't for like, giants like World Central Kitchen, coming into Oakland and, having a, $20+ million donation to be able to contract, with small and local, food providers, a lot of us who are in the food and supply distribution space wouldn't even have access to be able to provide, fresh food. So we're definitely seeing a heightened awareness of really the value, the importance, and the power of food during the pandemic.
Yeah, and to add to that, I mean, this pandemic has really shown the country how flawed our food supply chain is, right? Just watching the videos of people, tons of gallons of milk being dumped in the dumpster, meat, just right? Like that shows that, like, Candice and Chef Raine were saying, that this is there's a huge issue of access. It's not so much the abundance of the food, it's there. And we're seeing that now. USDA is trying to offload all of these family boxes, right? All this extra produce that they have this surplus of because restaurants are closed, because schools are closed. And it's interesting now, everybody knows their farmer, right? Everybody knows who runs the local CSA. Everybody knows where your urban farm is. So where you can go pick up your veggies. shout out to Erin Raise Roots out in the audience. Raise Roots is a Black-owned farm that's been actually working with the East Oakland Grocery Cooperative on our food distribution days. And what we've been doing for those distributions are building holistic care kit boxes with these brothers from Raw Soul Collective. And that's not only putting fresh, healthy food sourced from Black and brown businesses and farms in that box, but it's also putting in holistic healing items like herbal teas and tinctures, say smudge sticks, crystals, alkaline water, right? Because it's beyond, you know, the healing is beyond just fruits and vegetables, especially in Black and brown communities. Another thing that we've been seeing, and it's been mentioned a few times, is the mutual aid movement is incredible. And as for folks who are familiar with cooperative, mutual aid is usually the catalyst for building a worker-owned or a cooperative business. Mutual aid in terms of bringing your monies together, right? The Susu model, where you're pooling funds and it's just getting dispersed to community members that need it most. We're seeing mutual aid funds come out in the forms of an Instagram post where it's just like, you know, Black folks in Oakland, drop your Venmo handles. We have a fund and we'll disperse, you know, that pot. And or mutual aid funds like food, right? With EOC, with these folks who have the resources that identify partnerships to then share, and not taking away from each other's work. We're trying to network and uplift each other too. And I think that in terms of building cooperatives, and you're gonna hear me, I'm gonna be plugging cooperatives all night. But in terms of building cooperatives, we're also kind of looking at this as a moment to get in front of gentrification and do community development work that the community wants to develop and will do the developing, right? So we're also at a place where let's try to like let's look at the market. Let's form these coalitions, and we're even with, and the extra cherry on top is now we're seeing like big funds like PayPal and other bigger corporations now creating funds specifically for Black businesses so that we can do this work.
Thank you so much for those amazing responses. And we did originally have one more question planned, and that was, what do you want the people at this event to leave with? But I think instead we are going to transition into breakout rooms, and hopefully this question will come up pretty naturally as those progress. So I will pass it on to Gabby, who will then lead us into our breakout rooms.
Yes, thank you all so much for the insight and input. It's been so fun listening to y'all answer our questions for the moderated Q&A portion of tonight's event. So what Selena is doing presently is attaching and making available to everybody at this webinar all of the links to the breakout rooms. To clarify, they're not necessarily Zoom breakout rooms, but they are links to separate Zoom calls for one-on-one Q&As and engagement with each of our respective panelists. We encourage that y'all stay in one room and come back at 7:50 for us to close off the event, as well as for y'all to, for our participants to keep your video on. So yeah, people can begin doing that now. Thank you all so much.